How do we delay menopause? Because we know the vitality and longevity behind estrogen itself. There's also ways that you can get what we call precursors to hormones. And so if you were to talk to a hormone specialist and you said, I don't really want the actual hormone, what are some other things that I can get?
What do men need to know about menopause? Hi, everyone. This episode was recorded live at the Eudaimonia Summit in West Palm Beach, Florida. I was joined on stage by Dr. Jessica Shepard, an absolute powerhouse in the world of OB-GYN and longevity medicine. Now, while we dive deep into the specific lifestyle shifts that move the needle for women's health, I want to be clear, there's incredible information in here for men too. Whether you're looking to better understand the women in your life, and that's why I loved it, or applying these longevity principles to your own routine, there's a takeaway for everyone. You're going to love this one, I promise you. You're a board-certified OB-GYN and a Good Morning America celebrity, and you run a center. But just to jump right in, why is menopause hot right now? And I don't mean in the flashy sort of way.
Right? No pun intended. I think, menopause, one, has been around for ages. Imagine that. As long as women have been around, there's been menopause. But the context of menopause is really what we're seeing in change. And I'm so delighted to be a part of society that we're starting to talk about it more. We are starting to honor it more and not create this shame factor. But it's been around for centuries, and I think when we look at life expectancy in general, which is exactly what you discuss with such amazing features, I might say, I'm honored to be here with you, is that the life expectancy of a woman in the early 1900s was about 58, 59, right? And now we have jumped forward, gratefully, because I'm part of being able to live longer, is the life expectancy of a woman now is around 79. So if you put that in years, roughly 20 years of what we've expanded the life expectancy of women. Now, what we haven't accounted for in that gap is what happens to a woman's health. And a lot of what her health depends on is estrogen. And so when you had that life expectancy of 59, a lot of it had to do with reproductive years, biologically. If you were to just put it in biological features of when a woman is reproductive, obviously with the menstrual cycle starting in teens, and then we start to see in the late 30s and the early 40s is where you have that taper off of the reproductive years. So it made sense biologically that as estrogen was completely depleted at that menopausal age of an average age of 52, that the rest of her body and her organs and the functionality of it, which is dependent on estrogen, could no longer do that. And so because we didn't have the science and medicine that we see today and technology, women would typically have a shorter life expectancy, or they would die.
So to connect the dots between what I do, I study the world's longest lived people and try to understand the cluster of factors that drive longevity. It seems that women who begin menopause younger actually have a lower life expectancy than women who get their menopause later. You can't have it too late, but there seems to be a sweet spot.
Yeah.
Can you control when you're going to get menopause? Can you delay it or speed it up? Or is it body clock has got its own ideas? And what it's
You're putting us now another 30 years of what we'll see in innovation and technology is what we are actually doing now from a science perspective of how do we delay menopause? Because what we have delayed is life expectancy, right? But we haven't accounted for the actual menopausal transition to be delayed. And that's what we are starting to see in data and research and behind the scenes of what we are trying to do is not for reproductive purposes, is to expand menopause because we know the vitality and longevity behind estrogen itself.
I had dinner last night with one of the chief scientists over at Zoe, Dr. Frederica Amati, and she sent me some really interesting stats, and I'm sure you probably know them, but nearly all women experience at least one symptom of menopause, with 99.8% of women experiencing some. And it turns out we tend to associate hot flashes with menopause, but only 45% of women suffer from hot flashes. 68% of them suffer brain fog.
Yeah.
65% anxiety. But the number one symptom that accompanies menopause is sleep disturbance.
Yeah.
Menopause interferes with your sleep.
It absolutely does. And I know you know the implication that comes with poor sleep and poor sleep habits. And I don't think we really had that intersection of how sleep was so important. Even for me, you know, when I was training many years ago as a resident, is we really didn't look at sleep that way. It was more of you sleep when you die. And you can, which you do for a very long time. But but we also would be like almost like a badge of honor of how little sleep you could get and how much you could function on little sleep. And I think now that switching is how much better you can function on more sleep. And that's proven in data and decreasing comorbidities and what we see later on in life with cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and obesity.
I can put actually pretty fine point on it. The sweet spot, it seems to be is 7 hours, right around, for most people. If you're sleeping less than 6 hours, you're shaving about 3 years off of your life expectancy. And if you're sleeping more than 9 hours, you're shaving 2 off your life expectancy.
So there's a sweet spot. And actually for women, they need typically a little bit longer sleep in minutes. And that in the reproductive years of a woman, it can be based on where she is on her cycle. But in menopause, because we don't have those fluctuations as much as reproductive women are, it typically still is more than men. We need more sleep. So you need to let us sleep is really
and note to self. I want to learn here. I want to learn. So most of what you study is hormone driven, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you sort of look at longevity and health and sleep through the prism of hormones. One thing that happens in both men and women driven by hormones is hair loss. Of course, you never see it because, women are always beautiful and you don't know what they're doing to...
That was good. I see how you slipped that in there. Women are always beautiful.
They are.
You were learning.
I'm just a reporter. But what do you do if you get to middle age and your hair starts thinning? Does it happen to most women, or is it a minority?
I wouldn't say most. I think most women have an experience with hair changes. And it's not always hair loss. It can be hair texture. It can be their hair doesn't grow as long or as bountiful. But
if we want hair like yours?
Well, actually, the reason why I was like, the hair change is different, because even me, for like my hair, it just has these baby hairs that just won't go anywhere, right? So I'm constantly doing like that cowlick approach here.
My problem is my hair goes everywhere.
And someone would want that issue, maybe not on the face, but on the head. But it is something that we typically see with hair loss and hair integrity. And that has to do with multiple features, which is why I don't always like to kind of push everything into the hormone and estrogen decline. But estrogen receptors are all over our body. I think I start most of my talks and most of my podcasts with estrogen receptors are all over the body. So it would make sense that when we see these systemic things occurring with hair loss, when we have muscle mass, our bone mineral density, or gut health, all have to do with estrogen decline because there's receptors all over. But let's get back to the hair, is the reason why we typically do see hair loss is because estrogen is a very kind of vitality. It likes to bring a lot of blood flow to the area. And so hair follicles do take a hit when we have a decrease in estrogen, and the blood flow to the actual hair follicles are actually impeded, and that's where we see some of that, as well as testosterone shifts as well. So testosterone plays a feature in the menopause experience too.
So the Dan Buettner Podcast, I always love to give the audience specific things for people to do. So I am a 40-year-old woman and my hair is getting lighter. What do I turn to, minoxidil or finasteride?
Right. I always say, pull back and look at the grand scheme and the big approach, right? Because sometimes it can be thyroid. Thyroid actually is an endocrine kind of issue, is very common in women, especially after they turn the age of 40. We start to see a lot of disruption in thyroid. So it can be thyroid, not necessarily disease, but maybe thyroid is not optimized, even if it's in the normal state, and looking at its functionality of it. And then going to estrogen. Is there a kind of imbalance or a ratio between estrogen and progesterone that needs to be 10-2? The other thing that I would say, now that we are in the age of GLP, with rapid weight loss, we typically can see hair loss as well. And then the other thing, which is why I love looking at really the full experience of menopause, is nutrition and diet. Our dietary needs shift, but also with gut health, and how it may play a part in that, we see what we call leaky gut, and we're not keeping in the best nutrients that we need. So a lot of people are actually deficient in nutrients, which impact hair loss.
I want to get to nutrients, but before we move on from hair loss, are you saying if I'm starting to lose my hair and I'm a 40-year-old woman, I need to go see a doctor to get my hormones checked out, or are there any over-the-counter things?
I'm a big fan of minoxidil, actually. One, it's been proven it works. It's been around since the 70s to the 80s. So I always say you can do a topical, you can do a pill with minoxidil.
And you can just get that over-the-counter.
So you can get some very weak forms over the counter, but you can also get it prescribed. Obviously, you know, I'm a chief medical officer for hers, so we have minoxidil as well. So that's a great way to get it. We have it in gummy form. But outside of minoxidil, are you interested now as a 40-year-old
I could
woman?
use some more hair follicles up there.
No, we're still going with you as a 40-year-old woman. I love it. But yeah, there's minoxidil.
How about like this palmetto leaf and the supplements you can order up on Amazon?
I'm glad you brought up supplements. That always seems to be some very controversial discussion when we think of supplements. But palmetto leaf has been shown to help with hair. Does it help everybody? No. But does that mean that someone should not try it if they don't want to try a medication, or maybe they haven't been to their doctor to talk about all the other things we said? Absolutely. But the goal is everyone who hears about a specific need and what they need for that should look at it from a broad base of what are the different things I can do and what options do I have, and approach it that way.
Love it. How about weight gain? The average American woman, or man too, we all tend to gain weight as we get older. Our metabolism slows down. I'm guessing some of it is estrogen driven, but what is the healthy way at middle age to start to manage your health?
It always is, you know, prevention is key. And so for weight, because we know that estrogen is declining, because we know that metabolically how estrogen interacts with our glucose and insulin and allows for that metabolic shift to happen and we start to gain weight. But the other thing is aging in general. And you've seen this with the amount of people that you've studied and talked to, is that our bodies does start to slow down. And with that, that's where we have to push against it and be a little bit more exercise prone, moving, make sure we're not sedentary. And that also contributes to weight gain. So for women, again, looking at it from a hormonal standpoint, I always emphasize movement. I believe movement is medicine. And we don't incorporate a lot of that into our culture, especially when we think of resistance training and weight training for women rather than just men.
Yeah. We always think of guys getting all beefy.
Yeah. But do they?
Some of them get a little porky.
Yeah. They get porky too.
You know, I've spent my life exploring the world, not chasing adrenaline, but meaning. From the blue zones of Costa Rica to the highlands of Sardinia, I've learned that adventure isn't about going further, it's about going deeper. That's why the Defender caught my attention. It's not just built for the toughest roads, it's designed for people with a purpose. A vehicle capable of great things like the people who drive it. When I'm planning a new expedition or just heading up to my lake place, I want something that feels as durable and capable as the journeys themselves. The Defender, whether the 2-door 90, the 110, or the 8-seat 130, gives you the confidence to explore wherever your path leads. Because adventure isn't just about conquering the landscape, it's about connecting with it. Explore the Defender at LandRoverUSA.com. We tend to think that luxury means more plans, more movement, more stuff. But everywhere I've gone to study the world's longest lived people, I've found the opposite. In the blue zones, the real luxury is time. Time to walk instead of rush. Time to sit at the table a little bit longer. Time to finish a conversation without checking the clock. That's not indulgent. That's how people stay healthy and happy for decades. When I'm at my lake house in Wisconsin, slowing down happens naturally. Mornings start quiet, meals stretch out, evenings end early. It's not flashy, but it's deeply restorative. When I head back on the road, I like knowing my home doesn't sit still. I host it on Airbnb so someone else can experience that same pause, that same sense of ease. You don't realize you're missing it until you feel it again. Hosting fits seamlessly into my life. It's a simple, practical way to earn extra income while staying connected to a slower, more intentional way of living. Your home might be worth more than you think. Find out how much at airbnb.com/host. You know, it's interesting. I'll just interject here. In the 1990s, the common knowledge for health was to carbo load and run marathons. And now the common knowledge is protein load and pump iron.
Yes.
So
I think that, when I look at women's health in general, I feel that there's not enough attention paid to it. So think about it from research. From a research perspective, women were not always included in research. So, think of Jane Fonda, who I love. I heard her on a podcast the other day, and she is simply amazing. That was the cardio years, right? You put on your leotards and your headband.
Yeah, jazzercise.
Right.
Yeah, which I look great in a headband.
Too, he was great. But now we're leaning more towards into weight training because we know that muscle is the organ of longevity, and that's what's going to improve our muscle.
We could debate about that one.
We can debate. We're going to be here for another hour to debate just about muscle. Yes.
So how about ultra-processed foods in menopause?
Yes, let's touch on ultra-processed foods. So going to nutrition and dietary needs for women as they start to go through that transition, we start to see a shift in metabolic features. We also see a shift in glucose-insulin ratios, and that has to do all with estrogen. So we live in a society, obviously, in the Western world where we really place a lot of emphasis on convenience and flexibility, and what that yields is getting foods that's not prepared at home, going through that process where we actually have literally processed foods and ultra-processed foods. And so when that plays a part in our body internally, we know that we're going to increase inflammation. We know that we're going to increase the risk of having leaky gut. And we're also going to increase the risk of where we're not using and utilizing the food that we're intaking to actually help the function of what our body is going through in that moment of a transition for a woman in midlife.
So if you were going to give us a menopausal diet, and I love
menopausal diet. We're going to brand it right here.
Boom. You were here for.
Yeah.
So with specificity, other than of course beans.
Yeah.
What's going to be in our menopausal diet?
So the menopause diet, if I were to look at macros, right? So taking our macros of whether that's carbohydrates, proteins, and fat. We live in a westernized world where we focus usually on our carbohydrates, especially because we were able to metabolize it at a much faster rate in our younger years. As our metabolism slows and our requirements change, which we talked about muscle mass and loss, 3 to 5% of muscle is lost a decade, but it's actually increased at menopause because of the estrogen loss. So protein is that thing that I really feel that we have not learned throughout our years as women who were younger to focus on protein. Now, I'm not going to get into the debate about whether that's plant-based or meat-based.
Oh, I'm going to jump right in here, Jim.
But I don't like to shade the other side. But, obviously with meat protein, you're going to get your full composite of amino acids versus plant protein. You just have to be a little bit more creative. And I actually am a fan of plant protein. But protein really is going to be that macro that's then going to substantiate the building of our muscle and preventing sarcopenia, which is the loss of lean muscle mass. And that has everything to do, I know you said we're going to argue about the muscle of longevity being muscle, or the organ of longevity rather. But as we start to increase our protein intake, it's kind of like a seesaw. Everyone, if you were to think of a seesaw and what's going to keep that balanced, is if you are not eating protein, you're not going to substantiate the muscle loss that's occurring.
Right.
So you're going to increase that protein intake to down-regulate the muscle loss and improve your muscle mass.
Well, this is sort of my beef with the
no pun intended. We're full of puns today.
But I'll tell you, the world's longest lived populations, these people who are living 10 years longer than we are, without cardiovascular disease, without type 2 diabetes, without about 40% of the cancers we're suffering from, refractory rate dementia. They're eating about 1/10 the amount of meat that we're eating from animal products. They're getting their protein, but mostly from a grain and a bean. If you put those two together, you get a whole protein. But the other thing is, in blue zones, remember, they're living a decade, nobody's pumping iron. Nobody's building their muscle.
But what are they doing?
They're walking.
Every day. Movement.
Yeah.
The consistent movement.
But I think, honestly, we get it wrong if we tell the American masses, you need a gym membership, you need to get to the gym. I think what people need to do is change their streets so that they're not just built for cars, they're made for human beings. I think a garden is arguably the best physical activity for the long run because you're nudged to go there every day and it's low intensity and you can do it till you're 100. You don't
And
have
also
to,
look what you get from it. You get like amazing foods.
boom.
Right.
Part of that, our menopausal diet.
Yeah. And so I do believe when people really understand the fundamentals of protein, they could do a really good plant-based protein diet. I think also one thing to kind of like nudge back at your beef with protein is the process. Even though they're eating much less of a meat protein within their diet, we also overprocess our meats. So I think that plays a part in it as well. I would love to see a study that was done on specific proteins and how they're processed and what the outcomes are. For example, I love farmers market, right? So even though I've decreased my red meat intake from a protein perspective, I would say, well, now I'm going to look at the quality of what protein and where I'm getting that meat and seeing if that makes a difference as well. But one of the other topics that we talked about on TV today was colon cancer. And that has a lot to do with ultra-processed foods, not moving, the leaky gut, and how our gut is impacted by the foods that we eat and the lack of movement that we have. So everything that you were able to see over the course of traveling the world is really, when you look at it, wasn't fundamental basics that are missing as far as community and the foods that we eat and the preparation that goes towards that. And like you said, it doesn't have to necessarily be a gym membership, but having a garden. And we've kind of missed those basics in what we have created as like the most perfect environment of what we expect to be with only technology. We used to walk.
My fundamental argument is that if you want to live longer or be healthier, don't try to change your behavior because you'll fail in the long run. More than 95% of people who start a new diet, a new exercise program, a new longevity hack are no longer doing it in 2 years. If you want to live longer, you have to think about things that you're going to do every day for decades. And that generally taps into our unconscious behavior. My general pitch is set up your environment so that the healthy choice is mindless. It's the default. And if you were going to set up an environment that helps women through menopause, what would that environment look like?
Now we've gone from a diet to building environments. I love this. All here on the podcast, we are creating your entire lifestyle. If I were to think of environmentally...
One-stop shopping, right?
One-stop shop here is I really believe, like you said, your environment. So I'm very big on grounding as far as... And it doesn't have to be a big significant part of the day of setting intention, looking at the sun, getting sunlight as quick as you can. I'm a big believer in gardens as well. And that doesn't have to be a big garden in the backyard, but you can start somewhere on your front yard. I've seen really how, again, in technology, we've created micro gardens, right? So even starting there, I think is one way that I've incorporated into my personal life of changing my environment. How we sleep. We don't pay attention to how we sleep and the quality of sleep that we get. So I actually advocate for a lot of my patients who are having poor sleep, going to the other things that they can do is to change their mattress. And what kind of mattress are they sleeping on? And I think connection. Connection for me has been one of the biggest parts that I've learned in this transition as a perimenopausal woman is that at some point, we actually have to maybe skim some people out of our lives and put more people in who are going to create this environment because negative connections can also detract a lot from your life.
I actually think one of the best New Year's resolutions you can do, instead of getting on a diet or say, I'm going to change my exercise pattern, which fails usually by January 19th.
Oh, you're better than me. I'm January 10th.
Okay, I get extra 9 days.
Yeah.
But actually think about curating your immediate social circle. Yeah. And while not outright dumping your unhealthy friends, but say this January, I'm gonna identify one friend in my social network who I know cares about me on a bad day, I know their idea of recreation is physical activity. I know they're eating healthy, mostly a whole food, plant-based, right amount of protein, menopausal diet, and proactively bring them closer into your circle, invite them out for a cup of coffee or invite them to dinner and say, over the next month, I'm gonna make them our friend. Why? Because health behaviors are as contagious as catching a cold, and friends are long-term adventures. And remember, there's nothing you can do this week, this month, or this year other than not die that will have any impact at all on whether you're still alive and thriving in 2030. So you have to think about what's going to influence me for the long run, and your friends
because
are
it
huge
creates
impact.
consistency. It creates consistency in a fashion where they're going to enjoy doing the things. I've had a lot of my patients who, even when it's about alcohol, right? So if we wanted to bring alcohol in the mix of, we know that can cause cancer, but it also metabolically ruins our glucose insulin as we start to age and go through menopause, is many of my friends don't know what to do, or my patients rather, when they have friend circles that don't encourage their decline in alcohol intake. And it becomes uncomfortable. And so those are even the things that become hard for individuals to have to navigate. And so that's why the emotional part of menopause is also a big feature, because having to have these awkward, difficult conversations, or someone might think you have something against them, and really you're just trying to curate a different circle for yourself.
What do men need to know about menopause?
You know,
and I'm your perfect student because I'm actually interested and I'm clueless.
I think it's like this mystery. It's always been looked at as this stigmatized, don't talk about it. Women weren't even talking about it. So it became very uncomfortable and awkward. But even more so was the connectivity that they were having with their partners, spouses, or I've even had some younger men when they remember their mothers going through menopause, right? So there's a connectivity part of it that was missing because it was not an open discussion. And so the more that men become allies in understanding the transition, that it's not them, right? There's the ego that's involved in that. Of like, oh, this isn't about
Finally,
me.
for a change.
We're trying to give you a break here. We're saying it's not about you. And learning how to weave through that connection. There's obviously a lot. Social media is, can be something that's really good or bad. But right now we're seeing a lot of menopause and divorce, and menopause and relationship changes. And I believe that has to do with, as women are understanding more of this emotional and this hormonal shift, then we're not talking to them. So how are we going to advance women in this kind of transition through, I understand what's going on with me now. I know why I feel the way that I do emotionally or connectivity wise, but then we're not talking to the men. Then there's not going to be this kind of equal playing or this level setting between two. And then that's creating only more diversion. So for men, I would say lean into it. It's not for them to fix. It's sometimes just to allow to be heard, for a woman to be heard and understood, especially when it comes to intimacy. There are a lot of women who has nothing to do with their partner, but because of decreased libido or how they feel about themselves and their body changing, can play on their mind, and they don't want to be intimate with their partner. And so even like little discussions like that can help people be more aware of saying, oh, we can journey this together because we're now more both understanding of this transition.
How do other cultures look at menopause? Is it stigmatized? Is it accepted? Is it shunned?
It is generally actually embraced more in some cultures, and I'll give you an example. So in my book, Generation M, I opened the book with discussing how menopause is discussed in the Japanese culture. And it's termed kanenki. And what is it? Kanenki.
Oh, that sounds fun.
It doesn't. It sounds so much better than menopause. But the belief behind it is it's unfolding, unturning into a new chapter. And that's one that sounds inviting, right? Versus this is the worst stage of your life, good luck.
Yeah.
So in general, what we do see, one, experientially, I really want to place some emphasis on experience, because there was a study that was done called the SWAN study, and they looked at the experience of women in their actual symptoms based on ethnicity, which is so important because everyone is going to go through it differently. And the average of when we were just looking at maybe vasomotor symptoms, hot flashes and night sweats, was as little as 4.5 years when they looked at Japanese women, to as much as 11 to 12 years for Black women, right? So in between there, they had Caucasian women, they had Hispanic women, and Native American. And so you can see that the breadth of those years of experience. So imagine if on average someone may go through it 4.5 years and someone 12, what that might bring about as far as stress, having to deal with something, with relationships. So there's one, an ethnicity background to it, as far as contextually what women feel based on ethnicity, but also culturally, how that culture kind of creates around this actual transition that will happen for all women. How are we going to take that in, and how are we going to express that and allow women to transition into that? And I think that has a big key outcome on how women are going to do. It's kind of like the positive effect of, we have this thing that's happening, but we're going to make sure that you go through it in a way where you understand it and you're kind of leaning into it rather than shunning it.
There's actually this hypothesis around the evolutionary rationale for menopause called the reproductive conflict hypothesis, which is essentially that if you never go through menopause, in other words, if you can have babies at any age, it would set up.
I would not want anyone.
Exactly, it would set up this competition between grandma and daughter, because grandma still wants to have kids of her own. And in blue zones, we see this grandmother effect, where grandmothers who are no longer having kids are helping their daughters raise their children, which actually favors the survival of grandkids. So you can see how menopause could be an evolutionary benefit, not necessarily to the individual, but to the survival of the generations and family.
Absolutely. And I think that's where we do see everyone plays a role, right? Everyone plays a role in how our life kind of unfolds. And that's the reason why we do have biologically ending of fertility and reproduction and moving into a new phase. What I think we haven't done a good job at is, how do we turn this chapter in a book and create where it is fundamentally something that can be looked forward to rather than something that is fearful and dreaded. Yeah.
And pulling the shroud off and getting rid of the black box labeling.
I know.
That all steps in the right direction. So why might it be better to start hormone replacement therapy early? And not only why, but what are some of the mechanisms behind it?
Yeah, the mechanisms behind that, and just to kind of frame that, we used to only offer hormone therapy to women who had definitively reached menopause and had no more cycles. And that's what we did for decades. Then we had the WHI, and then we just forgot it all. We were just forget hormones in general. So now where we are is looking at that data, and timing is everything. And the WHI actually helped create that timing does play a part in when we start hormone therapy. So if we were to start in our mid to early 50s of hormone therapy, hormones are chemical messengers and have a very important role in how our body functions. And how our body functions is based on that, like you said, that consistency, that message that's being sent every day at a certain time in order for the brain to respond, the muscle to respond, the heart to respond. I'll start with those three organs because they're probably our most vital organs. So if timing is important and we can start before the depletion of a certain hormone, namely estrogen, then we are kind of giving runway to the ability for our organs to transition to a different level of hormone, but not depletion, and also the sustainability of that organ to create that function with that consistent mechanism that will give you longevity. And so where we were seeing this in science and data is women, typically 53% cardiovascular disease is going to be the cause of death. When we look at muscle mass,
Is it the estrogen somehow protects the arteries or protects the heart muscle? What is it?
It's protective in a way, so as we age. So there's aging and menopause kind of have an overlay. And so with aging, yes, you'll see more plaque in your arteries. You're going to see the heart muscle not be as kind of profound in how it pumps and how it brings in blood. Also our brain, and decreasing inflammation and decrease in plaque formation for cognitive decline. And then in your muscles, sarcopenia, it plays a part in how your myokines are able to release the stimulation for your muscles to grow. So when that's completely depleted in menopause and
when you say that, what do you mean?
When estrogen is depleted.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, if we're starting early with estrogen, you don't undergo these negative changes profoundly as if you wait.
Correct. Your body will respond to what it's given. And if there's nothing being given to it, it can only function to that capacity. And so the goal with hormones in a timing fashion is to allow the hormone to create some sustainability on a low level to decrease symptoms, but also allow for your organs to maintain the functionality of what they were built to do.
If you replace all your progesterone and your testosterone and your hormone to the levels of a 13-year-old girl, why do we even go through menopause at all?
I think it's kind of biologically how our bodies were designed to go through a process of not reproducing anymore. What we haven't accounted for is that gap which I started with, which are life expectancy of 59, and men's weren't much more either. It's just that now we've expanded that. We haven't expanded the mainstay of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone playing a huge role in how our body internally is going to respond to that. And quite frankly, you'd made a point I wanted to make sure we understood. When we think of hormone therapy, we're not giving you hormones to what we want you in age 13 through 24, even in your early 30s. We are really providing you with a nice low level of hormones that can allow your body to still function and a level at which your symptoms can be resolved and decreased. That's really what we're trying to accomplish.
Other than herbs, I mean, if you go to the internet and you look for herbal supplements and other pills, is there anything else that helps with the root cause of menopause? I meant the symptoms.
I would maybe go right to the symptoms, and I think a lot of what we see is the symptoms have everything to do with what you have studied, which is nutrition, which is movement. There have been studies, even mindfulness practice, have been shown to decrease what we see as hot flashes, night sweats, changes.
Well, give us some supplements that we...
Supplements, so I typically will ashwagandha, black cohosh can be helpful. Also, deficiencies in minerals and vitamins. Vitamin D, typically women come in with very low vitamin D, so finding that in a food source and or supplement, because typically you're not going to find all you need in a diet or consume it. And then fiber. I think fiber is also something that we lack, and that's why we start to see what we were talking about, colon cancer, but just how the gut is able to interact with the brain as well.
Yeah. The gut makes a lot of the vitamins. It's a factory, and our microbiome only produces those vitamins if we feed it fiber. What are some other alternatives to hormonal replacement?
Yeah, we've talked about supplements and food choices I think are important, but there's also ways that you can get what we call precursors to hormones. And so if you were to talk to a hormone specialist and you said, I don't really want the actual hormone for whatever reason, what are some other things that I can get? And you can get precursors. So if you think of hormones and how they're made, if you were to put them in like a production kit, there are things that are called prohormones, and they're right before you get the actual hormone that we're giving you. So for example, progesterone could be pregnenolone, or testosterone can have a precursor called DHEA. So I do multiple things with pre-hormones or pro-hormones is I can give that patient just that if they don't want the actual hormone for whatever reason. We have a thorough discussion of why. But the other thing is I have patients who are on hormones and maybe not reaching the potential of what they can get with that outcome. And then I will still add a pro-hormone if they need it as well. So there's multiple ways to do that. I have always said that hormone therapy, one, is not a drug. We are giving you something that your body had. Yeah. Now we're trying to give it back in a very small amount to get you those outcomes. But the other part of that is, big part is lifestyle factors. What are you doing outside of the hormones in your everyday life as you're starting to age that are going to also create this like really rich, diverse environment that will ultimately also help your symptoms and getting through menopause in a way.
Yeah, I think this is such an important theme. As with longevity and menopause, at the end of the day, it's an ecosystem. It
is.
And it's not just a silver bullet. Well, Dr. Jessica Shepard, it's a hot topic. I can't imagine a better person to deliver the message. Thank you for taking time out of your Good Morning American schedule to talk to us. And we hope to see you all when you're 100, and we hope you get through that menopause with grace and with joy.